You might have noticed I'm on the programme twice for today, so luckily I'm not going to do the whole of this presentation, so you don't get too much of me. Thank you. I'm just going to introduce the project, and then we've got two volunteers, and then we're going to hand over to Peter, who's going to talk through the results. Let's figure out how to use this. So, why did we do the project? It's no surprise that farming is an intrinsic part of the landscape on the Solway, but do we know enough about the farm buildings? Do we know what survives, how many, where are they located, crucially what condition are they in as well? And as well as kind of recording that, to have that record and know what's out there and what survives. Another reason for doing the survey is there's an increase in conversion of traditional farm buildings, and that's probably likely to increase more in the future. So Peter's going to mention this a bit more when he talks about the results, but if we don't know what's out there, how can we protect them when they begin to be converted? So what we were looking at was the farmstead plan. Some of these will have altered and developed over the years, but in many cases it's possible to see what the original plan was, whether that's courtyard, linear, U-shaped, L-shaped, dispersed, so lots of different plans to see. The types of farm buildings. There's a whole kind of list that we put on the form, but the main types are barn, byre, gin case. We did find quite a few of those. What materials are present? Obviously Mark's talked about robbing, so we did find bits of abbey, but other materials, clay, cobble, sandstone, the roof materials. Floors is a very important feature, any surviving historic floors, and any other details that were present. Surviving internal features. Now these are quite rare. Obviously changes in farming and different reasons have resulted in timber partitions being removed. So where they survive, that's quite a rare find. We did find some historic machinery as well, which is really interesting, and then other features such as feeding troughs and other internal kind of details. Externally as well, we were looking at cobbled yards, surviving boundary walls, wells, pumps, mounting blocks. So we're looking at the whole farmstead really. Anything that was there, we were recording it and taking pictures. So how did we do it? First of all, we had to get a list of the farms. Now, this was quite tricky. There is no list of farms on the Solway Plain. So to kind of put a list together, we looked at historic maps, we looked at modern day OS maps, we used Allerdale's GIS, and we put together a list of about 400 sites. Now, of those, we definitely knew that some were historic, some might have already been altered and were no longer working farms. But we sent out letters to all of those to notify them that we were doing this survey. Now, I'm not sure everybody received a letter, but it's always difficult when you put a letter kind of to the owner-occupier. I think a lot of them maybe went missing. But we tried to notify everybody on the list. Then we started recruiting volunteers. Now, this is the key part of it. Me and Peter didn't really do the surveys, it was the volunteers that did it. So we recruited volunteers, no experience was necessary, so we wanted it to be as inclusive as possible. We did have people who'd done previous building surveys though. We've done grade 2 surveys in Allerdale and Copeland in the last few years, so we had some volunteers from that, so they did have some experience of surveying, but many, this was their first surveying project that they've got involved with, which is great. So we put together a template form. Now this was more of a kind of a check, kind of aide-memoire for people as they were going around, because every farm was different, so it wasn't a case of kind of just going through and ticking things off. but that kind of helped to kind of remind people what they were looking out for. And the key thing as well was to take pictures of everything and anything. We did a couple of training sessions. We did some group visits to sites all together to kind of go over what to look for, how to do the survey, and just to do a practice really. And then the volunteers got underway. So we started this project, we did the training in June, July and August last year, and the surveys were completed right up until kind of December, January this year. I then started collating the results into an enormous spreadsheet. This is quite an unwieldy thing to look at, so I've just done a little screenshot of the first section, and you see it just go on and on because there are so many different fields that we were collecting data on. But this kind of gives you an indication of what the results look like in spreadsheet form. So you can, where's the red? Aha. So we've got site name, address, postcode. This UPRN is quite important. This will allow the Solway Wetlands and Allerdale to link this to their GIS data system, which is going to be really useful when the results are put live on a map, which is hopefully what's going to happen. A grid reference to help identify the farm, because in some cases there's a similar name, the same postcode, so the grid reference is crucial there. And then this is, these two columns are probably the most important after the address. So significance and risk. Now Peter will talk more about this, but crucially, if we found an exceptional farm that was at risk, then that's is now flagged up to the Solway Wetlands team, the AOMB and Allerdale, to see what can be done about that. Is it at risk through condition? Is it at risk through conversion or development? And how can we ensure that the exceptional features of that farm are maintained for the future? So the key outputs, we had 20 volunteers involved in the project. Almost all of them took part in the training and did the site visits. A couple of those volunteers were buddies and friends that were recruited by the volunteers to go out with them, because that was a key health and safety thing, is no one was to go out alone. So we always went out in pairs. Over 850 volunteer hours have been given to the project, which is an amazing total. Really pleased with that. Of that initial list of 400 sites, the volunteers visited 229, and 203 of those were surveyed. So the difference there is that some sites didn't want to take part, so they might have been visited and said, we don't want to take part, that's fine. And so the list, that spreadsheet that I just showed you, that is now the most comprehensive list of farms on the Solway Plain that exists. So we've got 229 on there, the original list of 400, so we've kind of done just over 50% of that original list of 400. So there is kind of the opportunity to do more, potentially in the future. So this is brand new information that's available for Allerdale as the local planning authority and the AOMB. And as I say, the results of this will be made available to the public as part of the legacy of the Wetlands Project. So it's a great resource for people who are doing research, want to know more about farm buildings in their local area. And also the owners of the buildings themselves, a lot of them were really keen to find out more. Peter and I are also producing some guidance notes, mainly on kind of the principles of converting farm buildings and what not to do and how to do those conversions in the most sympathetic way. And we're going to do a CPD session for planners as well, because this is going to become more of an issue in the future, so it's good for us to kind of flag up important principles. And also, now that we've got this set of results, Allerdale and the A1B can actually look at a strategy for how to deal with those at-risk sites to make sure that they're not lost or altered too drastically. So some really good outputs this project, and I'm now going to hand over to one of the volunteers, Jenny Lister, who's going to talk a bit about her experience in the project.
My husband got me into this. He spotted a poster recruiting the volunteers for this, but I got my own back by recruiting him in my turn. As a retired local studies librarian, obviously I've got an interest in local history. I'm an oral historian and I do a lot of talking to people. So I'd been in touch with quite a number of people in our area. We're actually from Silloth. And I knew very well a couple of local farmers, which we found a huge help. When we first started doing the survey, we went to the most well-known, not always known as the most reliable, because he is a former winner of the Greatest Liar contest, but very knowledgeable, and he and his son gave us lots and lots of names of people. So our experience perhaps was we were able to contact a lot of people prior to going to the farms, rather than as many people had to sort of turn up unannounced. We were able to contact people. It's been fascinating, and I think one of the really interesting things, and I think this cropped up with the archaeology, it's the evolution, the buildings that have gone, or the buildings whose purpose have changed, the recycling of those buildings within the farm footprint has been a really interesting has been a really interesting part of the project. And meeting the people, and again the changes in farming, farm practice, talking to the farmers themselves about how, in their recollection, and quite often their parents or the grandparents took the farms, and the changes that they were aware of. One chap, I said to him, I mean, he had a large farm, he had a lot of stock, and I remarked on the fact that when his grandfather had taken over the farm, there must have been quite a number of people working there. And he said we had 8 labourers as well as the family on the farm, and now he runs it alone. And this was repeated again and again. People who had memories of far more people working on the farms and the changes that had come about during their lifetimes. A lot of the chaps we spoke to were in their 60s. Not all of them had family who were willing to carry on the farm or had family to carry on the farm. So it does make you aware of the precariousness of some of the changes. Some of them told us wonderful stories. I won't repeat some of them because they're rude. But I think the loneliness of many of the people working on farms now encourage them to talk to us perhaps more freely than they would if you just sort of trundled along and said hello. The fact that they don't get that many people, or if you do go to the farm, you're somebody who's after them for tax or for insurance purposes or checking up on whether they're following these regulations or whatever. So to have somebody who actually just wanted to look around, not be judgmental, listen to what they were talking about was quite a change, I think. This gentleman we met at Newhouse Farm, Woolsey. He was our guide to the farm. The farmer was very helpful, but this chap actually showed us round. He was the elder of the dogs on the farm. And here he is demonstrating just outside the front of this house. He guided us round, and he also brought us small sticks, leaves and other pieces of material to play with. That was one of the farms that we surveyed. Interesting. It is actually a listed building, this one. It has a Venetian window. It has a wonderful collection of different date stones. And the farmer has the most fantastic collection of anecdotes. We had a terrible job getting away because I just wanted to stay and listen to him. But again, a very, very interesting place to go to. it's been such an interesting experience meeting the dogs, meeting the people. We were very fortunate. This is one of the Woolsey farms. We actually surveyed all of the ones in the Woolsey area. An amazing amount of stuff that had been robbed from Woolsey Castle. They were quite proud of it as well, I think, that they had a stake in history insofar as they'd actually nicked it. Oh, well, their forebears had nicked it and built it into the buildings. These rather dinky little cats, the two here at the front, I missed the photo opportunity of a lifetime with those two. Never mind the farm buildings. I was standing chatting to this chap, and they walked towards me across this barn floor. Beautiful beautiful wooden dividers still in the stalls, still in the barn. But these two kittens walked towards me with their heads leant together and their tails entwined. And I couldn't say to the chap, never mind that, let me take a photo. And it was gone. So my photographic opportunity of a lifetime at Woolsey Farm, and I lost it. But it was another of those interesting things that you found. I think it's been such a rewarding thing to do. As I say, we've mostly been in the Silloth area. Met a lot of people that I knew peripherally. Interesting to find how many people were apologetic about their farms, mostly because they were full of all the things that they'd stored there. Well, this is this was the hay barn, but it's full of. I've collected, I've stored it, I've kept it. But it's part of the recycling ethos, isn't it? I mean, you don't waste things on a farm. If you've got some timbers and things, you store them in one of the barns because you might need them again. If you've got a bit of an abbey or a bit of a castle, then they've already been recycled into your farm. So you recycle the machinery, you recycle things that are kept. And I think that's been one of the really interesting things. The stories are being recycled in the Oral History Project, as well as those that were told to us. I think it's something I've really enjoyed doing, and I think that in conversation with Rose and Peter recently, there was a suggestion that we might go on and try and persuade some of those who weren't able to accommodate us this time round, and some of those who actually we found farms that weren't on the list, and perhaps we could go to those instead. Well worth thinking about, and it's been a really rewarding and enjoyable thing to do.
Yes, we're lucky enough to have another volunteer who's willing to talk about the project. Anna Gray is going to talk a little bit about her experience of the Farm Buildings Survey.
Yes, hello. Well, I was another of the 20 or so volunteers recruited to do this farm building survey, and like Jenny was saying, it was a hugely rewarding experience. I mean, just meeting people, stumbling across the unexpected, having encounters with farmers, listening to their life history, encounters with their animals and with wild animals as well. It was just wonderful, and I just really enjoyed every moment of it. So my presentation is going to be a bit less maybe about some of the architectural stuff, but more about some of the experiences that we had. I worked primarily with Claire Jeffries. Is Claire here today? I haven't seen her, I don't think. Claire Jeffries not here, but also with Sandra Mallion, who's just literally turned up. Sandra lives in Bowstead Hill, was the owner of one of the properties that was listed, and was so interested that you came along with me, and we actually did all the buildings in Bowstead Hill. The other areas I did were Whitwrigley's, where I'm sure it's pronounced totally differently than I can say it, but Whitwrigley's, Fingland, Outerby. I did Bruff by Sands, and I also did Bowstead Hill. But I'm going to start with this one, which is in Fingland. This is High House Farm. And the reason I've actually included this one is because when I went up, I always greet the farmer with a smile. I always expected to be rebuffed to some extent. But I just sort of persevered, and I actually had a 100% record. I wasn't turned away once, though I did have some interesting experiences in that process. Here was one of them, because the farmer, once he realised what I was doing, said, okay, you can come and survey my farm, but before you do so, you must come back to me with more information about the farmhouse. So I had to go back. I spoke to Peter. I said, Peter, help. This farmer wants more information about his house, particularly about this date stone above the front door. And Peter duly obliged, and I went back armed with my paper information, gave it to him, and he then allowed me to look at the rest of the farm, which wasn't that particularly interesting, but it's just an experience, a bit of a sort of what's the word? What's the word? I don't know, some experience with one of the local farmers, and I don't know what that is. I mean, I've looked at this. I really can't make out what that is actually above the doorway, and the lettering. Oops, sorry, just go back a moment. Is very, very faint to make out below here as well. But Peter did some stuff on that. Then this is Midtown Farm, Brough by Sands, only literally a few yards from here. This is a wonderful farm. It's virtually intact, it's virtually unaltered, it's operational today. Now I tried no less than 4 times to survey this farm. The first time he had his grandchildren around, so he didn't want me around there. Second time nobody was in, so I didn't do it. Third time there's a funeral on in the village, again, so I couldn't go. And the fourth time nobody was in. So it still remains to be surveyed. So possibly today, I don't know. But a wonderful example of a farm. And then by contrast, we have Chestnut Farm at Lathes, which just a small part of it, but the whole farm was fairly derelict like this. Can you see okay there? And the farmer lives in this house which you can't physically get to the front door of. The front garden is so overgrown, it was absolutely impossible to get to the front door of the farmhouse. But all his buildings, they're all there, they're all recognisable, but they're all in various stages of decay. Then another my sort of favourite farms. You know, I did about 30 farms, but only a sort of handful of them stay in my memory, and Coop Stone Farm was, and it's partly because of the owners. They cared for their farm, and you can see here they put in a new barn door in the old style, and although it's a bit dark, there's a sort of wooden lintel over that barn, and they've even put the bricks in to actually follow the wavy line of the lintel, which is just little nice touches. And you can see that the cobbled floor, the cobbled courtyard is in good condition, free of weeds, and for those that are sharp-eyed, you might see a mounting block just here as well. So a lovely farm, well cared for, very remote, not in a village in fact at all. Studholme, right, Studholme. Studholme is a small hamlet. It was 4 farms. Now you've just got really 1 farm left and the remnants of the other 3. Now one of those is this amazing, oops, just go back a moment, amazing big barn here. And next to that is a gin case underneath here with presumably a threshing floor above it, which had some machinery still intact, but completely abandoned. Went around here with Paul Hedworth of Farming Kirkbride, who used to actually own these farms, but no longer. And you can see behind, if I go back to that last one, just behind, you can see another barn here. These were 2 separate barns, belonging to 2 separate farms. They weren't part of the same farm, but 2 separate ones. But this one behind, you can see it's a tall one, and it's clay. So there you are. There is the clay wall, I mean, about to collapse, really. Any moment about to collapse. And then that's a view from the other side. We went inside. I know it was a dangerous structure, but we did go inside. And it was full of old farming machinery, all just rotting away. Old farming machinery, as well as sort of sandstone troughs, and just anything you might associate with the farm was actually stashed in here. And while we were there, we actually disturbed a tawny owl as well, which just flew out while we were there. So you can see this is just one of the pieces of machinery inside that barn. And it was absolutely stacked with it. A real interesting resource. Okay. Cross farm here, many of you know about the dates, well, not this stone here. Oops, go back a moment. Above the lintel of one of the barns is this carved stone, which is Roman. It actually has the words Neptune on it. So it's clearly been taken from the Roman fort, which is very close to that site, if not actually on it, and then reincorporated into the farm building itself. Here, another little oddity, Hillside Farm, Bowstead Hill. We haven't just got a date stone, we've got a face of the owner there with the initials TR. Now this is Sandra helped me out here. TR stands for Thomas Rigg, and he was the owner, the builder of this farm. The date is 1857. Oops, where have I gone now? Sorry about this. What happened there? How do I go back? Sorry, I just zip through them again. We needed there. No. Okay. So 1857. I just did some research on him actually. He died just 2 years later and is buried in Brough Church here. So just 2 years later, he dies at the age of 59 as well. But he's put his portrait on his house. And talking to Sandra, your house is built by another Rigg who is probably related to this Thomas Rigg. And there are some similarities in the architecture between this building and your house as well, which you picked up on. So that was quite interesting. Just an example of a wonderful trough with the pump, the cast iron pump, again at Bowstead Hill, again a cobbled courtyard. We also found this on the back lane at Bowstead Hill. Didn't know it was there. Just came across a clay dabbing cottage with this wonderful, I don't know whether you call it mullions when they're wooden like that, but anyway, it's quite an interesting building. And then this very fine gin case. Now, most of the gin cases we came across were attached to buildings, and they were fairly plain, but this one is quite ornate. I mean, just look at the arches underneath here. And it was freestanding, it wasn't actually attached to one of the other buildings. Part of a house at Bampton, which is up for sale. So the farm buildings, everything, all up for sale. And quite intact in terms of the buildings. You know, the pig holes are still there, the stables are still there. They're all there, very overgrown. But this was a very unusual gin case. And I don't know what will happen to this. It may just be allowed to fall down, who knows really. Again, one farmer showed me this strange carved stone, not that big, you're only looking about sort of 12 inches high, which was in the base of a wall with a recess behind it. He didn't know what it was for. I didn't know what it was for. And I tried to find out more information and didn't succeed. So if anybody's got any ideas about what that's all about, then let me know why it's there, why there should be a recess in a wall. I have no idea. But it's one of the oddities we came across. This Brough Hall farm now, this had the most wonderful store dividers. I didn't come across anything like this. They are actually made of upright slabs of red sandstone. We continued around this farm, which wasn't particularly interesting until we got to this building. And we looked at this. I was working with Claire Jeffries, and we looked at this and said, well, is this a house? I mean, it's got windows, but there's no chimneys. There's no obvious front door. What is it? There's some barn entrance on the end there. What is all this building about? And we eventually went inside and it all was revealed. It was clearly a beauty parlour for sheep. And there was a massive, it's either a Texel or a Beltex ram being being manicured really, ready for either sale or whatever. So there he is making a great sort of deep-throated noise all the time. This was going on, but there's the farmer just clipping him minutely with these old-fashioned shears. So you just came across things like this all the time, and that's what made the whole survey just so fascinating. You just never knew what you were going to stumble across, and for that I thank you for being involved in this. It was great, and that's the end of my my presentation.